get in there. So we have started recording now. So you will make sure that you will get a copy of this to watch again afterwards and to share as well. I already told you that we're going to have Q&A at the end. A couple of outcomes that I hope you get today. One is understand a couple of tools that will be available to you after the webinar. You can tell me if you want them. We'll send them directly to you, complimentary for attending the webinar. So a couple of tools that can be available for you to use, as well as I really want you to get at least one nugget, one idea, something that you can take away and start implementing immediately. So I want you to start thinking already as you're listening, what's a decision you can make, something that you can do to make sure that you can do something based on what you hear today. So that's my goal for you today, is to make sure that you get something that you can immediately implement as a result of being here today. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about today is, again, there we go, is the type of businesses. There's 4 different businesses classifications. Just about any business could fit into one of these 4. So let me explain each one of them, and then we're going to start thinking about where might your business be. The first one would be a business that we call at risk. Typically when a business is at risk, they're on the verge of losing control. We're probably worried about payroll. It's affecting our sleep at night. It's affecting our stress level, our physical health. It could be we're worried about clearing payroll. It could be we worry that all of our business is with one account, and if we lose that account, we're at risk. We don't have things documented. So that's kind of what at risk means. It typically shows itself in a high level of stress outside of the office to that business leader. The next one is what we would call average. And so you'll see here in the description that it says doing reasonably well enough. So what I mean by that is we're doing okay, but it's pretty easy for us to regress and go back to at risk. It might be the loss of one key employee. If that employee leaves, we are in big trouble. It could be if we lose our best customer, we're in big trouble. So things are doing okay, but it won't take very much for us to be able to fall back into that at risk. The next category we call well-run. So a well-run business is respected in their industry. You'll see they're likely in the top 25%. However, we're still a little bit vulnerable. So we might have a strong leader. We've got some good people. Maybe we've got some of our best practices documented. Maybe we've been fairly successful at managing our staff and turnover and hiring good people. But it really hasn't become a total culture where everybody in the organization strives for leadership excellence in every position that they're in. If you were that company, then you would be excellent. So that means a culture of excellence is everywhere in the organization. We've got disciplined processes that we stick to and enhance in all parts of our business. We're capturing best practices and knowledge and making sure that's transferring. We are hiring A players into the organization. We're bringing in people that want to stay, and we're able to develop them and grow them through organization. And it's really just become a culture of the company. Whether you're at the bottom or the top, you have a culture around being expertly managed, excellent. So that's kind of what excellent means. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our first poll. So I want you to think about for a minute, which category are you? So not where do you want to be. I want you to take a really honest look, an honest inventory. Think about your business and which of those 4 categories, at risk, average, well run, or excellent, are you? I'm going to launch the poll in a second, but this particular poll has 2 questions. So I'm going to show you the second one because you might need to think about it. The second one is, what would the bottom line financial impact be if we were able to move the business up a level? So let's pretend we're average, and if we could get the business to even well managed, what would the bottom line financial impact be? And you're going to see when I launch the poll here, I've given you some ranges. Be brutally honest with yourself. No one but you can see the answer. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. What's the opportunity cost here? How much better could we be? What's it costing us not to be better? All right, we're going to go ahead and launch that first poll. You got to log out. It's giving me an inactive. It doesn't look like I can launch the poll at the minute. Something is going on that I won't be able to launch the poll, so I apologize for that. I tested it just before I got on here. So do me a favor, since the poll isn't working, this is our first opportunity to use our chat window. Go ahead, type in the chat window. You can do it privately if you only want me to see it, or put it to everyone. Which category are you? At risk, average, well run, or excellent? Which category are you? And then if we had to think about what it's costing us, here's the levels that you can't see in the poll that I gave you. Was up to $100,000 was the first level. The next was $100,000 to $500,000. The next level was $500,000 to $1 million, $1 million to $2 million, or $2 million and above. Really round numbers. What do we think that this potentially could be costing us? If we could actually get to that next level, how much more revenue could we add to the bottom line? Looks like I've got some people voting. I appreciate it. We've got some well run, which is fantastic. We've got some average. I appreciate the honesty. Some of the answers I'm getting are anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000. Seems to be, I've got one that's over 2 million. So we've got a very wide range, and I've noticed that nobody on this webinar is at risk. And I'm not surprised by this at all, because you're on the webinar. At-risk business owners aren't striving to learn more, aren't trying to figure out what else don't they know that they should know to take their business to the next level. So thank you for participating, even though the poll didn't work. I'm happy to see that no at-risk, and most of you are falling in average and well-run, and I'm seeing the financial impact anywhere from that 500,000 to $1 million or above. So it's significant dollars, if it's fair to say. That's the estimate that I'm getting. So where I want to go next is, let's start talking about what are some best practices, what are some of the things in our leadership that might be preventing us to get to that next level, and what are some things that you can do and change to help you and your organization grow. So let's start by looking at effective and ineffective leadership. So what I'm going to give you is a bunch of characteristics of ineffective leadership. And as I'm going through each one of these, I want you to take some notes for yourself. And I want you to write down, which one of these am I guilty of? Most of us are guilty of some of these, at least some of the time. So as you're thinking about this, I really want you to self-reflect and think about for a minute, which one am I guilty of? All right, the first one is unwilling to relinquish control. That's pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes we see this when the founder of the business, if it's a family business or a publicly held business, whoever's in control or founded it wants to keep doing it their way and wants to control every way that it's being done. Even in our business, when I first got into this business, I got some of, well, that's not how we've always done it. This is how we do it, or I want to control it. So if we're the ones that are constantly wanting to control, we're not bringing new ideas to the table. We're not empowering our people, which, as you know, is super important as a leader. The next is they stay with what their comfort level is and what they know. So being a lifelong learner is something that myself is a huge advocate for, everyone in our office. But if you're not a lifelong learner, if you're not allowed yourself to push yourself out of your comfort zone, set a trap for yourself to do something that maybe scares you or that you haven't done before, we're not going to grow. Growth comes outside of our comfort zone. So if we're stuck with just what we know and what we've always known, and that's all we're doing, we're not being a very effective leader. The next, and this is a huge one, and we're actually going to talk about this a little more in the next slide, but basically they're a doer working in the business and not on the business. How many of us are guilty of this? And there's a lot of different reasons for it, but when we are not focusing on the business, where it needs to go, who do we need to add to the team, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years, and taking that time out of working in the business, being the salesperson, being the production guy, being the marketer, being whatever it is that you functionally can do so well for the company without taking the time out to work on the business, we're significantly limiting our growth and our leadership effectiveness. The next one, they believe their own professional leadership skills are enough to grow the company. If that were true, we would have all really successful companies. The reality is most of us as leaders started in one capacity and have grown into this leadership thing. Most of us didn't start in an organization as a leader. So as a leader, as a manager, there's different skills, different things we have to develop. And if we're not building on those skills or bringing people into the organization that already have them, we're limiting our growth. This one I like, and we're actually going to talk quite a bit about hiring as we go along today. They continue to hire people like them, or hold on to employees too long. So those are two totally different problems, but I see this a lot where people like to hire people like them. And that's human nature. Those of you, I know we've got some clients on the call today, and some of you, even if you're not a client, might be familiar with DISC styles. What that is kind of how we communicate, and there's 4 main styles, and we tend to surround ourselves with people who are more like us because they're easier to deal with, they understand us. However, we're limiting our growth if we're not hiring people that aren't like us. So I see that mistake made a lot by leaders. They hire people that they like because they're like themselves instead of people that they need. The other thing I see is we hold on to employees way too long. And this is an issue. And I know some companies, you may really pride yourself that you have a really low turnover. And sometimes low turnover is good. Sometimes low turnover is bad. If we have people in an organization that really aren't adding value, and they're nice people and we like them and they have a family, and we're not willing to help release them into the workforce to find something else, we've got a problem. Next, they don't believe in sharing company information with employees. So this is where leaders hold everything really closely to the vest. It could be not sharing financial information. It could be not sharing goals. It could be not sharing vision. Any number of things that by not sharing it with the organization, how are they going to know how to help you? How are they going to know what they need to stand behind? How are they going to know what the vision is so that they can follow forward? Not setting realistic goals, holding people accountable for specific behaviors that support those goals. This is a huge one, and we are going to talk about this one at length, so I'm not going to do it now. Some leaders are pretty good at setting goals, but a lot of times those goals are set in wishful thinking. They don't have the plans to back them up, and then we're not measuring any specific behavior on how we're doing those goals. So we're going to give you some stuff on that today. They don't set a good example for their employees. This is the do as I say, not as I do type of mentality. This is also an ineffective leadership. I can honestly say I've been guilty of it at times, but obviously you can see that that's not something that we want as a leadership best practice. We should be leading by example and demonstrating, not just talking. We need to be doing what we say we want them to do. And this one, seeing themselves as above everyone else. I think one really true tale sign of this is if everything coming out of your mouth is I this, I that, I this, chances are we're looking at ourselves above our people. And we can't make our companies go without our people. So if I'm sure you're not one of those people, but start paying attention to how often are we using I versus we. Because if we're not putting ourselves above everyone else and we're putting us with everyone, we should be saying we. So those are just a couple of ineffective leadership strategies. So let's talk about why these sometimes happen. A lot of times it has to do with the stage in which the business is in. So let's look at this really quick. So obviously when we start a business, if you're an entrepreneur and you started a business, you're starting out as the doer, the worker. You're making the cakes, you're making the sales, you're doing the design, whatever it is functionally that you started the business because you knew how to do. And you're only doing 10% leading because chances are you don't have that many people to lead, and you're really capable and the best on the team at the doing, so you do that more often than leading. Then we transition to kind of that intermediate stage, and at this point we should be doing 50% of the time and leading 50% of the time, and then a late established organization should be 10% doing and 90% leading. The challenge that I see is a lot of companies fail to get to that later stage. And there's actually a great book that I would recommend that illustrates this even better than I just did, called The E-Myth Revisited. He does a great job talking about the doer hat versus the managing and leading hat and how that impacts our growth. So when we're trained to be a worker, so if we're a really good accountant or we're a really good salesperson or a really good designer, or whatever we were trained or whatever we started the business on, chances are we haven't been trained as a leader or a manager. They're different skills. And the result is we end up in that average because we're doing too much and not leading enough. And sometimes that's because the skills haven't been developed, or it could be because we don't want to relinquish control. Any number of things could be the result. But those average or at risk, we haven't managed to get to that intermediate or late stage of a business. Okay, I've given you a lot so far on leadership ineffectiveness. Let's transition now and talk about blind spots and how to avoid them. So there's actually 13 blind spots that exist to leadership. We have all had them, have them, it evolves. Depending on where you are in your business, you might have mastered one. And then it could be that you weren't even aware that the other one existed. That's the definition of a blind spot. I mean, blinders are put on so you can't see what's behind you. So I'm going to highlight the 13, but we don't have time to talk about all of them today. I would have you on this webinar till 4 o'clock, which is not our upfront contract. So I only have time to get us to 2 o'clock. So I'm going to go through 6 today. As you see the list go, the ones in bolded are the ones that I'm going to elaborate a bit more on. But even as you're looking at the rest of the list, start to think, am I guilty of any of these? Am I missing something in one of these areas that maybe I should be considering? Even if I don't talk about it today, I want it to still be taking notes to resonate if it's something that you have. All right, the first one, not having a process for hiring. So this is a very common blind spot, and at first you might not think you have it because you say, I hire people, but do we have a robust, repeatable, documented process that ensures we get the type of candidates that we want every time so that we don't end up with, I hired this guy, he interviewed really, really well, but after he was on the job for 30 days, I realized that was the best sale he ever made was to me on the interview. So this is one that we're going to talk a lot about in a few minutes, so I'm going to keep moving. The next, which goes hand in hand with hiring, is improperly onboarding people. The whole, here's your desk, good luck, or welcome to the team, go get them, is not effective for onboarding people. So we're going to give you some strategies and some tools to do that more effectively as well today. The next one, failing to tie corporate goals to personal goals. So hopefully all of you have published, documented, shared goals that are SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. Hopefully you have those. But where we see a disconnect sometimes is failing to tie those corporate goals to personal goals. So we're going to talk about that one today too, and how it's really important as a leader to figure out what drives your people, what are their goals, and how do we tie their goals to the company goals so we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. Not creating a culture of accountability. This is huge. And what I found is almost every leader I talk to wants to do this thing called accountability, but isn't really sure how, and it is lacking in majority of the organizations that we work with before we start working with them. So this is another one that we are going to dive into deeper as we go. Next, no common sales language. So we're going to talk about this one too, but what happens is in most places in our organization, we've got a common language. In accounting, in shipping, in our product line, we all know what to call stuff. We all know how to get a delivery out. We know how to process AP or AR, but what we find is that common sales process, sales language doesn't exist. For some reason, we allow sales to kind of be sales, and it doesn't apply. So we're going to talk about that blind spot as well today. Next, not focusing on lead generation. So we don't have time for this one today, but what are we proactively doing? What kind of KPIs, what kind of measurements, what are we doing to focus on lead generation? Because even if we're doing really well now, it's going to end at some point. The good times do not just stay good times without action. So when we look at our goals, when we look at our people's activities, how much of it is truly focused on generating new business? Because oftentimes that's lacking in an organization. Not capturing best practices. This is another pretty big one. We've got a lot of things that we do well in an organization, but when I talk to leaders and I say, well, where is that documented? Where can we find that? Oh, Ed's about to retire. He's been here 30 years. What are we doing to capture his knowledge so that we have it? And I get a lot of, good point. I'm not sure that we have that. So being able to capture those best practices so that they can be done repeatedly is huge. Failing to train and coach management staff. So we're going to talk about coaching today, but I was reading an article not that long ago and I saw a staggering statistic that relates to this one. In the Harvard Business Review, only 27% of companies train management level and above. Think about that for a minute. 27% of companies train management level and above. So what happens is we tend to promote our top performers. So let's take sales as an example. A lot of times we'll take our top sales guy. You're really good at sales. I'm going to promote you and make you the sales manager now. Only now I have two problems. One is I've taken my best salesperson off the street who's no longer solely focused at generating business. Two, I've put that person in a position where chances are they don't have the skills developed that they need to be a manager, because what it takes to be successful in selling is very different than what it takes to be successful in management. So failing to train and develop those management and above skills. Next, not building the bench. So this is basically, what are we doing to ensure the talent pool, the people that we have, we're developing them for the next level? Because we're going to have turnover. We're going to have growth. There's going to be times where we need to move people up. So what are we doing to prepare them for that next level? How are we developing them? How are we figuring out where they want to go next? Building the bench is really important. Not knowing how to coach. This one we will be talking about in depth because in my opinion, this is probably one of the biggest lacking skills that leaders have. It has to be developed and it isn't for most people. So we're going to talk about that. Not sharing the vision with those who have to implement it. So a lot of times us as leaders, we have in our head why. We know why we're here. We know what we're trying to accomplish. But sometimes we don't communicate that well enough with the rest of the team to know the why behind the what of what we're asking. And then are we inspiring their why? Do we understand the why of our people, and are we inspiring it so that everyone can help us get there? Fostering a culture of learned helplessness. I wish I had time for this one. I don't. But my favorite rule when it comes to this is what you allow will continue, or what you tolerate will continue. So if we have somebody coming to us who's consistently asking us to solve problems for them and we keep letting them, it's going to keep happening. Learned helplessness. What are we tolerating? What are we allowing that we don't want to continue? That's a culture of learned helplessness. And lastly, no methodologies and systems. We talked about how sometimes operationally on the side of the business, we have systems. Sometimes those systems are effective. Sometimes they need to be enhanced. Sometimes they don't exist. It might just be Bill knows what to do and he does this on this machine, but it's not documented anywhere. There's no process that's actually documented and enhanced over time. So that's what I mean by no methodologies and systems. So as you can see, 13 blind spots. I want you to think about for a minute, where are some of yours? And I'm going to dive right into hiring because that's our first one that we're going to talk about today. So hiring to me means not having a robust, repeatable process. Hiring people we like and hoping that they fit is not a hiring process. Another sin I see here in hiring is leaders will hire their best available versus best fit. So sometimes, especially in today's economy where, let's face it, good people are hard to find, unemployment's about as low as it's been in a really long time. So sometimes we make the mistake where we'll say, well, I really need somebody right now. This person isn't perfect. I'm going to take them anyway. I know they're not perfect, but I can develop them. They're just the best of what I've got. And more times than not, what happens is they end up not working out because we took best available instead of best fit. The other rule I want you to have down here is hire slow, fire fast. We are big believers in have a process for hiring, which I'm going to share you the 8 steps in a minute. So that we're taking our time to ensure we really have the right person. And then for whatever reason, as soon as we know that this person isn't the good fit, we got to let them go. And I see a lot of leaders struggle with this. It's even a lesson me as a leader over the last 14 years in this business, I've had to learn as well. Firing people isn't fun. Nobody likes to do it. At least very little people like to do it, right? But when we hold on to people too long, it hurts not just that person, but everywhere in the company. So let's dive into the 8 steps. The first is we have to identify who are we looking for. So most people, when they're identifying who they're looking for, they write a job description or do a job posting. But we haven't gone deep enough. We really have to identify who's the ideal person, not who do I have, who have I had, who's the ideal person that I need on my team to grow. And we use this acronym SEARCH to help us do this. And this is one of the tools that will be available to you after the webinar today. But here's what SEARCH stands for. What are the specific skills and abilities that this person needs to have? What is the demonstrated experience that this person needs to have? So what previous experience do they have to have? What's their attitude? This one gets missed a lot. but what are the attitudes and beliefs that they have to have coming in? Do they have to be a lifelong learner, for an example? Is that a mindset that they have? We spend a lot of time in our Sandler training looking at mindset and beliefs. What are those mindsets and beliefs that this person has to have in self-confidence and conviction around who they are coming in, that you know they need to be successful on your team? R stands for results. What type of previous documented provable results can they prove? So we see a lot. I'll give sales as an example, right? So if we're hiring a salesperson and they'll say, well, I did X number of dollars. Okay, well, how did we get those dollars? Is it because you were handed that account, or did you proactively go in and get that account? Those are very different results. So we've got to be very clear on the type of results that we're looking for out of this person. Cognitive skills and ability. This is more of the how are they think, how are they going to actually work, what things do they need to know how to do, how do they process information, how do they learn, are they a fast learner, can they work on their own, what are those cognitive skills? And then H stands for habits. What are the habits and specific behaviors that they need to be successful in your company and in the role? So this is one of the tools I'll give to you with an example, and you can fill it out. But at the end of the webinar, you'll be able to get this. We highly recommend that you have a search model on all your key positions. This works everywhere. It doesn't just work in sales. It works for an operator. It works for a leader. It works for an HR person. This transcends across all of the positions in your company. The second is, obviously, we have to be able to source the right candidates. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it could be a black hole. But are we effectively sourcing candidates? Are we being proactive in sourcing candidates, or are we posting an ad and hoping people respond? Because the people traditionally, the people that are responding to job postings aren't always the best fit. We've got to have some sort of proactive reaching out and identifying of potential people that we want to say, hey, I don't suppose this probably isn't a fit for you, but we've got this open position. Would you mind forwarding it on, even though we really want them to look at it? So what part of proactive searching, contacting are you doing in addition to just posting a job ad? Third is, we've got to be able to assess the candidates, and we're big believers in this. We assess candidates early in our hiring process with objective data. Objective data is so important because when we interact with somebody, especially if that somebody is like us, we tend to like them if they're like us. They may say the right things, but then they show up and after 30, 60, 90 days, we learn they can't actually do what they said that they could do. Assessments helps us with this. Assessments with objective data helps take the emotion out of our hiring process. It helps us narrow the target so we're not wasting time interviewing 10 people when really we should have only been interviewing 2. It allows us to interview stronger because if you're using the right assessments, it should have interview questions that really help you laser focus and target on the key areas that you're looking for. We use these tools often. We use them ourselves in our organization. If that's something that you're not currently using and want more information on, certainly we're happy to help you with that. But a behavioral-based objective data assessment is critical in being able to get that objective data and take the emotion out. Next is, obviously, we've got to qualify the candidates, and that objective data is part of that. So there's job fit scores that tells us how does this person score, and we've got some rules of thumb on if they score under a certain level, you know, we probably shouldn't even talk to them. If they don't have X, Y, and Z industry experience, we probably shouldn't talk to them. So we've got to be able to qualify them through phone screens, through initial interviews, through objective data to make sure that we're talking to the right people. Because in interviewing people, spending time with people takes time. Takes a lot of time. Typically, it's not just you that's interviewing them. It's HR, it's other people in your organization. Maybe it's an hour interview. When you add it up, interviewing takes a lot of time. So we want to make sure that we're qualifying the right candidates into that interview process. Then obviously being able to interview in a systematic way so that we know the questions, we're not winging it. We know everybody on the interview panel, if you do it in a panel or individual interviews, knows what they're looking for and are able to ask questions. And then we're going to be able to inventory what did we see. As you're interviewing somebody, you should have a scoring sheet to help interview you. How are they answering these questions? What did you see, Bob? What did you see, Sally? What did you see? So in that we're inventorying what everybody saw. Next, obviously, is hire. We're gonna hire the person, or we're not. And then the 8th one is onboard, because believe it or not, successful onboarding starts in the hiring process. starts in the hiring process. So we should be, as part of the hiring process, helping the person understand during the hiring process what they're going to be measured on, what their KPIs are, and what their onboarding plan is going to look like so that we don't have a disconnect. Because sometimes what we see is an employee gets here and says, whoa, that is not the company that I thought I was joining, and jumps. Or we see, man, this person is just not performing the way I thought they would. Well, a lot of times it's because there wasn't clarity up front during the hiring process about exactly what was going to be expected. So here's another place where I had a poll, which isn't going to work. So I'm going to this is a simple yes or no answer. Do you share your KPIs and onboarding plan pre-hire? So during the hiring process, are you letting them know, here are the things that you're going to have to do. Here's the things that we're going to measure you on. And here are the way we're going to onboard you. This is what your first 30, 60, 90 days are going to look like. So go ahead, use that chat window again, type Y for yes or N for no. Is this something you're doing now as part of the hiring process? So far, I see one yes, and I see quite a bit of no's. Go ahead, keep voting if you want. That's fine. So we're sharing them up front. What are the things you're going to be measured on? How are you going to be managed? And here's how you're going to be onboarding. Are we sharing this during the interview process? Looks like, just based on round numbers scrolling through it, I may have as much as a quarter yeses, which I think is fantastic. Congratulations to those that are already doing it. Those of you with a no, this could be your takeaway, that we're going to share some of this ahead of time so that there aren't surprises and everybody's clear what's expected when the person shows up. Okay, let's transition and talk about onboarding. Have you ever had your employees be subjected to the hire and fire school of onboarding? Hire and forget it, not hire and fire. So basically, here you go, here's your desk, good luck. Glad you're on the team, go for it. I've seen it happen. What about, how long does it take for the new hire to become profitable or make a contribution to your organization? So are we tracking time to profitability of people that we bring in? So it's not just salespeople, right? So we've got operation sides of people. How long does it take for them to start making a contribution? Because if that time is too long, we've got something wrong in our hiring process or in our onboarding process. But we should know that number. That should be a number that you know. How long does that take? Another hire and forget it mistake that I see is, this is the onboarding plan. Okay, Bob is our top guy. Just shadow Bob. You're going to follow Bob around. Just watch what he does. Do exactly what he does, and you'll be fine. Not an effective way on onboarding. So let me give you a couple of tips when it comes to onboarding. So the first is, we need to figure out before they get there, what are the top 20, 30, 40 things that they need to learn over what time frame? So 30, 60, 90, 6 months. What do they need to know and when? Prioritize it for them. We brought on a new office manager recently. One of her first days, and even during the hiring process, we talked about, here's what's going to be expected of you in the first 30 days. And now that she's here, we go back and look at that 30, 60, 90-day plan. Where are we at in the 30 days? What have we mastered? What do we still need to work on? What did we end up pulling from 60 to 30 and adjusting over time? But being able to tell them exactly what it is that they need to be expected to learn and master, and prioritizing that over time frame. They can't learn 100 things in 30 days. What are the most important things that they learn in the 30, 60, 90, and beyond? You've got to be able to prioritize that for them as a leader. Next is, where can they find the resources? So unless you want them showing up at your door all the time, making sure that it's documented, that they know where can they find the resources that they need to be successful. That might be product information. That might be people that they need to talk to. Where can I find who's my expert on this, or who do I go to on that? Making sure that they have those resources and know where they are. Lastly, give them an example of what you want from them. The better you can template things out or give them scripts. So let's take sales as an example, right? So if I have a new salesperson on my team and that person needs to be doing some prospecting activity like cold calls or asking for introductions using LinkedIn, I better give them a script if I want them to be effective. And then I'm going to practice that script with them to make sure that he understands it. But without giving him that as a starting base, it's very difficult for that person to hit the ground running. So what can you template out? What can you have scripts for? Even the office manager, she has a script of here's how I answer the phone, so that she knows what she should be saying when she gets here, because she's new. She doesn't know. She doesn't know what she's supposed to be doing. So documenting examples and scripts. The more robust you can be at building this onboarding plan for the key positions or all positions in your organization, the more successful you're going to be in hiring and bringing people up to speed faster. You'll be able to duplicate it again once you have it. You'll be able to enhance it with the new person. Just makes that whole process really condensed for future hires. And what it does is it really helps the hire know, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it right? Am I where I'm supposed to be? A successful onboarding plan helps that. All right, so now we're going to transition away from onboarding and we're going to start talking about goals. So we gave you this as a blind spot already, failing to tie corporate goals to personal goals. So I'm assuming that we have smart and long-term business and professional goals ourselves, and that the business goals or even the professional goals are shared with our direct reports or the organization. But how well are we really doing at understanding our people? What's important to our people? What are their personal goals? What do they want to learn and develop? Where do they want to go? How are they motivated? This is a huge blind spot, and it didn't show up exactly on its own call out, but not everybody is motivated the same way. So we've got to really understand, how are our people motivated? One way that we can look at how people are motivated is, are you motivated, pain motivated or pleasure motivated? What I mean by that, am I motivated by moving away from pain, or am I motivated by getting to gain? Those are two different things. And just however you're motivated might not be how your people are motivated. Other things when it comes to motivation is, some people are extrinsically motivated. They're motivated by money. You can dangle the carrot in front of them. Here's how you make more money, and we'll get the performance out of them. But the extrinsically motivated people in the workforce, percentage-wise, has decreased over the last 10 years. We've seen a huge shift to more intrinsically motivated. Intrinsically motivated meaning I'm tying that money to something else. Team performance is really important to me. Titles might be really important to me. Recognition, being recognized for what I do, is really motivating for me. Titles, things, not just money. So it might be, we get this, your reward is going to be a better laptop. That, believe it or not, is more motivating to an intrinsically motivated person than if you gave them the $700 to go buy the laptop themselves. So you as a leader have to figure out, what makes my people tick? What are they motivated by? What are some of the goals in their personal life that I can help them be successful with? If we're not having those types of conversations, we don't have a deep enough level with our people. We talked about this one already a little bit. Have we inspired a shared vision? You know, that whole why behind the what. Simon Sinek has a great TED talk around finding your why. But what we have to recognize as leaders is our why isn't always the same as our people. So we've got to be figuring out, what's the why of my people, and how do I tie their why to the company why and what I'm trying to get out of them. So that goes to, do we understand the personal impacts? Do we really get to that level of our people? Because when we do, we can pull those levers, encourage that to help them get to where they need to be. Because everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? We have to have that mentality of looking at things from their perspective. What's in it for them? What are they looking for? So it's our role as a leader to try to figure that out. Okay, enough about goals. Let's talk about common language and the essence of keep this whole thing moving here. Common language. So we talked about how in a lot of areas there's common language. So accounting, right? Everybody knows what a debit is. We know what a credit is. We know what taxable things are. There's probably a process in accounts receivable, 30 days, 60 days, all that. It's a pretty common language. Even in marketing, there's common languages. In shipping and receiving, there's common languages. But oftentimes in sales, there isn't. So let me kind of help you understand what I mean by a common language or a common process in sales. So what are the stages of the sale? So the basic stages of any sales process is, we've got a suspect, we've got a prospect, we've got a qualified prospect, and then we've got either win or lost, right? We've got closable, qualified, and closable. You would be shocked at how often I hear people calling clients or prospects or suspects clients. It's, well, have you done business with them? Are they a prospect or are they a client? Oh, well, they're a prospect. Just having a common language of what does a suspect look like in our organization? What does a prospect look like? What constitutes moving from a suspect to a prospect to qualified to closable? What do we need to understand, uncover to move them along, or more importantly, sometimes disqualify them out? You know what? They don't have pain. There's no real reason for them to change. There's no compelling reason for them to change. Why am I spinning my wheels? Why are we going to go do a demo? Why are we going to do a plant tour? Why are we going to do a proposal if there's no compelling reason to change? When we can really map out our sales process to that degree and how do we advance through those levels, then you've got that common language. If you want a test that you can do in your organization, do me a favor. Go to your salespeople and even your operations people too, and ask them, what are the steps in the sales process? Have them write out the steps in the sales process. I guarantee you, you're going to get different versions. Not everybody's going to be on the same page. So the better you can articulate what a suspect, prospect, qualified, closable looks like in your world, the better everyone in the organization is talking the same language. What are the objectives? So sometimes when managing salespeople, this isn't always clear. Well, we're going to set a meeting, or I've got a meeting set next week. Well, what's the objective of the meeting? What are we trying to accomplish? What questions still need to be answered to ensure that we can progress this forward? And what does yes mean moving forward? So what's the commitment that we're looking for ourselves? So let me give you an example. If I were selling packaging, for example, and I needed to go in and present some samples, that was my next step, that I'm going to go present samples. Well, what commitment is the prospect willing to make after they see those samples? So really, it's not just the resources on our end that are required, but also what is the prospect? What's the commitment we're looking out of them? And then have we completed a readiness checklist for the next stage? This is really critical in that handoff. When we win a deal and we're passing it over the fence and having operations handle it, are we really ensuring what exactly we sold, what the expectations are, how the customer or client is going to measure success? You should have a checklist and a process for this so that everybody is on the same page. We have a tool called client-centric satisfaction. If that's a bucket for you, it's not on the targeted list, but we are happy to talk to you about it if you need it. All right, let's keep moving to my favorite one, accountability. So I said earlier that this is probably the most common buzzword or hope or wish of leaders that I see and talk to, but most leaders really don't understand or are willing to do what's necessary to truly create a culture of accountability. And when I say accountability, what I mean by that is responsibility, taking responsibility and ownership around what I need to do to be successful. Accountability is not just slapping somebody and saying, you didn't do this and why aren't you doing this? Accountability starts with accepting personal responsibility and ownership around what I need to do to be successful. So we have to make sure that we're understanding what we need to be done and we're inspecting what we expect. I hear a lot of times, oh, I sure wish my people would do this. Okay, so how are we measuring that behavior? How have we told them that that's expected? We don't necessarily hear that. So in order to inspect what you expect, we've got to break it down to KPIs. We have to define the key performance indicators that we're looking for success in the role, any role. And most organizations are pretty good at coming up with the KPIs of lagging indicators. Here's a lagging indicator: revenue, profit, margin, closed deals. So they're important, we need them, but it's how we keep score, and either we hit it or we don't hit it and we can't adjust. So a lagging indicator, need it for measurement, need it for keeping score, but it doesn't allow us to course correct. Leading indicators allow us to course correct along the way. So let's take sales as an example. So in order to win a deal, I don't just win a deal. There's leading activities that I need to do to be able to win that deal. Such things as new conversations. I have to talk to new people. I have to have first ever meetings. How many first ever meetings do I need to be having so that I can ensure I hit my closing ratio? If you're in a longer selling cycle, how many second meetings do I need to be having? Here's another one that's really good to define and track is referrals. Are we proactively going out and asking for referrals and introductions? Every company, if you're good at what you do, you get some. But how many are we proactively going out and getting? Because we can control our activity. We can control our behavior. We can't always control the result. So if I have a metric around how many conversations I want to have, I can control picking up the phone. I can't always control whether they're going to answer. But if I don't at least pick up the phone and set a target for how many calls I need to make, how in the world am I ever going to meet my conversations target? So once we have those leading and lagging indicators identified, we've got to set activity metrics or goals around how often those need to be happening. And they're going to be different depending on the people in your organization. So a new salesperson focused on new development may have a higher prospecting than somebody who's in an established territory that's more on the keep and expand. They would need to upsell, cross-sell, and manage the business that they have. Same with a new person in operations. They might need to do this where a more experienced person needs to do that. So making sure that we've got those KPIs identified, and then we've got the desired frequency goals around how often they should be doing them. Then we need to manage against them. So we actually have to track them. So if I need to be having conversations and meetings or making dials, I need to have a goal for that and some way to track it. This is where CRMs are really helpful. If you don't have a CRM, being able to track it even in Excel spreadsheet, or if all else fails, the really cheap solution, a notebook. Somewhere where you are writing down or keeping track of the activity, because what gets measured gets done. That's not something we came up with. I'm sure you've heard of it. But then once we've got our goals and we're tracking them, we've got to develop a cadence of accountability. That means we regularly have to be having conversations. We have to have team meetings. WIM stands for weekly individual meetings, where we're coaching towards a behavior. We're evaluating, did you hit your behavior goal? Did you not? What got in the way? What can I do to help? We've got to have penalties if the behavior isn't met. Penalties if the behavior isn't met. The strongest I've ever seen example of a company that has done this really, really well is it's in the salesperson's employment contract. You're going to have a goal for prospecting activity. That has to be reported weekly and posted. If it's not, after 30 days, you get a warning. After 60 days, your commission goes down by 5%. After 90 days, your commission goes down by 20%. It's documented in their employee agreement. So they know from the very first day, okay, this is how I'm going to be measured, and here's the consequences or the penalty of not doing the behavior. But you as a leader has to be willing to set a penalty and enforce it. And the upside of penalty is strokes. We have to give people kudos and comment and give people congratulations when they actually are doing the behavior. We have to recognize it. All right, let's move on to coaching, because once you can't do accountability without coaching. Can your managers tell you the top 2 gaps that they're working on with each employee to help them develop and improve? Do we have it fine-tuned into exactly what they need to get? Do we have a coaching plan for our regular direct reports, for our own people? Do we have a coaching plan? Here's the difference. Coaching is really an art and a science. Coaching is not telling. Just because I tell you, well, you should have done this, or here's what I would have done, that is not coaching. Coaching involves asking the right questions to help somebody self-discover what they can do differently to change. And that is hard. That is very hard for most of us. And I'll tell you, it's something that me as a leader, I'm constantly, even myself, trying to enhance, and because it's never perfect. It can always be enhanced. But telling somebody what you would have done or what they should have done isn't coaching. Coaching is being able to ask the right questions to help them self-discover. And there's actually 3 types of coaching. There could be strategic or tactical coaching, which might be on a specific deal that they're working on, a meeting that they have coming up, but more tactical around a tactic on how do I do something or how do I plan for this. We could have strategic coaching, which is maybe more for an overall target market or a new territory that we're going into, or a new product line, some strategic coaching around what do we need to be thinking through doing differently strategically. And the last is conceptual, and this one gets missed a lot. In between our ears, that head trash is what we call it, but our belief systems, all of us have belief systems that we consider unsupportive. I mean, they're getting in the way of our success. And our perception is our reality. So unless you're having conceptual coaching opportunities with your people where you're really helping them self-discover what is some of the head trash, what are some of those limiting beliefs that they have that are holding them back, it's hard to see progress on the tactical side of things. So we need to have a process. Whether you're doing it weekly, whether you're doing it bi-weekly, you need a process, you need a set agenda every time. So your employee comes in for that coaching meeting, they know exactly what to expect, and it's the same every time, same cadence. They should be prepared with what it is that they need to be working on, and every time you're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. And we've got to coach to the behavior. We can't just coach to the results. What are they doing? Coach to the behavior that they're doing, not just the results that they're getting. So I have thrown a ton at you, and we're getting closer here. I saw somebody that mentoring is really important. Somebody commented on that. I agree 100% with you. Mentoring is very important. There's actually 4 hats of leadership, and mentoring is one of them. Coaching is one of them. Training is one of them, and supervising is the 4th one. So yes, mentoring is critical in building that bench and other things that we've talked about today. So really quickly, let's go through how does Sandler define organizational excellence? They've got 6 P's. We have 6 P's of organizational excellence, and it really starts with planning. So planning really means what are we creating the vision of where we want to be, not just where we are now. What's the vision? What's the goals and planning that we need to put in place? And what are the benchmarks and measurements along the way that we need to hit to get there? So planning isn't just tactical around what do we need to do next quarter. Planning should be creating a vision for where do we want to be 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now, and what are the goals, plans, and benchmarks that we need to be putting in place throughout our organization to ensure that we hit them. The second one is positions. So organizational excellence starts with identifying, first of all, what's the right structure for your organization. And recently I went through this exercise probably about 6 months ago, where a lot of times we get stuck in the way things are today. If you were to create an ideal structure or organizational chart for where your company should be based on where you want to go. So if I want to be $20 million in 5 years, what is the organizational structure that I need to get me there versus what it is now? Because it's oftentimes really different. And it actually allowed us to have some recognition of, you know what, there's a key bucket here that we're missing. We need to hire somebody in client services to help us better manage some of our goals and direction of where we want to go. So do yourself a favor. Write out the ideal org chart or structure of what do you think your company should look like, not what it looks like today. And then we do search models and robust job descriptions for each one of those slots in the org chart. What should those be? What do we need in those spots from a skills, from a search model, and the job description that defines it? Then we've got to go find the people that fit those spots. So excellent organizations have the right people in the right seats on the bus. You've heard that before. But by really defining it in the position, it makes us a lot easier to be able to really identify, hire, and onboard the people that fit in those positions. It also allows us to take a look at future people and future positions. What do we need to be able to move somebody up? What does the path of growth look like? Next, processes. This is big. Most problems are the result of a lack of or poor process. So if you look at any frustration you have in your organization, my guess is it's because there's no process or the process is broken. So being able to develop and enhance processes on a continual basis for every spot in your organization, from how the telephone is answered to how products goes out your door to how a sale is won or lost, having it documented process that's enhanced over time. Fifth is perform metrics. That's basically KPIs and metrics for every role. How are we measuring through key behavior KPIs, leading indicators, not just lagging indicators, of what each job function needs to be successful, and then actually looking at the data and managing against it in a dashboard. And last is passion. So most of us, if you started the company or taken the company over or big leader in your company, you know the why and you're really passionate. But how do we take that passion and translate it to the rest of the organization? So you can see that this is a continual process. It doesn't stop, because as we grow, we're going to have to evolve. This never stops. We're constantly doing it. All right. I've come close to my time, so now is the time for questions. I haven't seen any questions that have come through, so if you have a question and you want to unmute yourself, that's fine. Otherwise, go ahead and type it into the question box. If there's any specific questions, now would be a great time for us to address those. Happy to help if you have any. Go ahead and type them in the chat box, or go ahead and unmute yourself. Doesn't look like I have any. So my guess is we're shy, or I've overwhelmed you. What is next? Evan says. Thank you, Evan. That's a great segue into the end of this webinar. So here's what's next. At the end of this webinar, you're going to be given access to 2 tools. Here's the 2 tools that you can access. We'll send them to you complimentary. The first is a blind spot assessment survey. It will allow you to kind of give yourself a self-assessment on where are your biggest blind spots, so you know where to focus. The second is that search model tool. How do you know how to identify what those are for your key roles? Both are fillable form PDFs. They are our gift to you as part of being on the webinar today. We also have an onboarding tool if that one stood out for you. I don't have a screenshot for that, but we can certainly help with that. Where can we get the blind spot assessment? It will be emailed to you if you go to this website right here. So write this down, gerryweinberg.sandler.com/success. If you fill this out with your information and check the box of which one applies to you, we would be happy to get that to you. So you'll see complimentary blind spot, search tool for identify who you're looking for in your next hire. The third one I didn't really talk about, but this leadership for organizational excellence, that circle that we saw, we will be doing a kickoff program for that, a full day kickoff program for that in April. So if you'd like one of us to contact you to talk about maybe what that program is, or talk about anything else that you heard today, and maybe we can help you, maybe we can't, but maybe we can, then go ahead and select that box, and the assets will be emailed to you. You will also get the slides and the recording by Friday. So we've got to make sure that it recorded right and get that out to you. But if you registered, we'll be sending you the slides and the recording, as well as any of the other assets that you have on the sheet here. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. We had a great group. I apologize for the polls not working. I'm glad you hung in there and put them in the chat box. The recording will be sent to you by Friday. So Ted, I know how to contact you directly, but you should get it. If you don't get it, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email address, and be happy to get it to you by the end of the day Friday is when you can expect it. So we are right up on 2 o'clock. So with that, I will say thank you, everyone. Good luck, and have a good rest of your week.